Welcome. This is Dr. John DeMartini. This is one of the most amazing and inspiring shows that you can listen into. If you want to be on the edge of your seats, if you want to open up your heart, if you want to expand your mind, and you want to meet incredible people, stay tuned because you're just about to experience a transformative radio show that will change your life. And you're listening to the Dr. Pat Show that's coming up right next.
Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. Talk radio to thrive by. Powerful, inspiring, and coming to you live, bringing you stories of people like you and me, busting through and living life full out. Get ready to dare to wonder what your life would be like if you knew you could not fail. Hey, everybody, I have a great segment for you today. Okay, my guest, Dr. Paul Corona, and Annie Lennox have something extraordinarily in common. Why? If you've ever heard Annie Lennox sing that song, Why, it's the constant word over and over again. So what's the difference? Because the difference between Annie and singing that song and Dr. Paul Corona is the great doctor doesn't just stop at why. He asks why, what, when, how, and who. And that's what I want to talk to you all about. And he is here joining me here today on the Corona Protocol in practice. So I want to talk about two things today for both of you. I want you to get familiar with these three words, the Corona Protocol. So just kind of remember that, because this is a journey of Dr. Paul out in the world, focus on connecting the mind and the body, and 35 years of this focus. And he and I have this in common, although we did go in different directions in search of what it is that's going on there. But what you're going to hear today, as we talk about 3 secrets to success, we're going to talk about the guide, but much more important, what we're going to talk about is the solution. So today, as we look at whether it's the prescriber's guide, whether it's the concept, what I want you all to understand that books like this, movements like this, come from a particular question. And they usually come from a particular emotion. Dr. Paul, thank you. Dr. Corona, thank you for joining me here today. 35 years, like banging those doors down. Let me just say like that. I was struck by a line in the book that I want to start out with, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. And it's the thing that, man, I relate to so much. I would have never gone and spent 10 years in a doctoral program if it wasn't for this line. And what I want to say is this. As I read the book, one of the things you say, may I just do
Sure.
it? First of all, you got the itch. I love the itch. But you don't just scratch the itch. You got to figure out what's going on. So you got the itch to write some more books. And then you said you've been thinking about this over a previous year and you decided to write again. But here's what I love what you said. I realized that I learned so much, and it was apparent to me that I had discovered was what I had discovered was not common knowledge. I realized that I had learned new ways to diagnose, treat these conditions in ways that were not being done. Here's the punchline. I was frustrated because I had discovered that there were so many people that were suffering and not getting the help they need. Now, why do I love that line? And of course, we're going to talk about more. Because you and I are here because we get to a point of frustration. We get to the point where there's something that we know that's not being discussed. And unlike a lot of people, you did something about it. So I want to kick this off by asking you, how deep was that frustration, Dr. Corona?
Well, it's a frustration that built for so many years. When I started practice in the early 90s, I made some discoveries in 1993 about the mind-body connection. And then throughout the 90s, I started, and again, I was a family doctor at the time too, but was starting to see that, really getting involved with mental health and be really interested in it. And so that's why, at the end, about 2000 or so, I just got so frustrated that I need to do this full time. I can't do everything anymore. I can't be a family doctor and do this. And that's what started me on the writing journey in about 2002, and 6 books later in 2023, 2025, I finally finished writing. But yeah, I wrote all this time 6 books just because I realized that there, like I said, there was so many people out there that were not getting the help they need, and I saw there was the solutions I knew, I wanted, and I got to the point where I really needed to teach this to doctors. And so my last 2 books are basically training manuals for prescribing doctors, because I want to spread the word about
Yeah.
better in ways of doing things, to help our patients.
Yeah. So you and I have to at some point compare astrology charts because 2002, like I walked away from every consulting high paid job I was supposed to get, and here I am today. But when we have that calling, I want to ask you this question because what you're talking about here, and this is what I love. I was reading just a few lines and you're talking about scientific proven and you talk medical solutions stop addiction, bullying, homelessness, school shootings, and suicide. 30 years in the making. Now my life has all but one of those. Mom commits suicide, homeless at 17. I don't need, we could spend a whole show on addiction, but we won't. um we really could. Bullying, right? And then yet here we are because for some reason we couldn't stay quiet. I got to ask you this one question. Was there a particular situation? You know what that expression is? The straw that broke the camel's back. I'm not even sure what that means, but was there one where you said no mas?
Really, like a year or so, in 1993, most people have heard of SSRIs like Prozac and Zoloft and
Yeah.
Lexapro. But the first SNRI that works on serotonin and norepinephrine, Effects XR, came out, and that was the moment where really knew that there was something going on, because patients would come back and say, what did you give me? And, well, how was it better than your Zoloft? I go, wow, it's way better. I started seeing that it was helping people physically and taking away their pain, helping more with anxiety than and not just depression. And so that's what really, and during the whole 90s, I was realizing that I didn't see other doctors prescribing it. All the doctors were prescribing SSRIs first line, and I've disagreed with that for a long time. And then in the field of mental health, oh, you got to give it 4 to 6 to 8 weeks to work, and that's nonsense. So I started seeing all these things I was reading in the books and journals. It wasn't true. And I thought, why do they keep saying the same things over and over again that is not true? And that's what the problem is, because of the fact that nothing has changed really in the last 35 years in mental health. Everything's stayed the same. All the books stay the same. The journals stay the same. And that's what the frustration that I saw, that people weren't, doctors were not hearing what they needed to hear, and patients were not getting the help. And so that's what drove me to doing all I've done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, come on now. Somebody that's in a mental health crisis to wait 8 weeks. I mean, are you kidding me?
Exactly.
Uh, I mean, we could spend a whole half hour on that. But the other part of this that was counterintuitive is, myself, I'm in 37 years of recovery, right? I'm longer than that for drugs, right? Walking away from drugs in 1973.
Wow.
But my entire life, my family growing up, my mom was a drug addict and alcoholic. So you can imagine when I popped out, it's no wonder I got quiet when they gave me
Right.
Zambuca, right? But in the world, here's what I discovered: so many counter or contra indicators. For example, you enter a 12-step program, and back in the day, they used to say, I can't work with you in this program because you're taking an antidepressant. I can't work. And I'm like, what, what, right? And you're like, are you going to exclude people from health because you have a set of rules? And I think you drew a line in the sand and said, no, we're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see it all the time. I mean, I think 12-step programs are great. A lot of people, the support system is excellent. But not just them, but there's really a strong anti-medication mentality out
Yep.
there. People feel that this is mental health is different than everything else because there's no blood test, there's no way to prove it except for hearing people taking a history, trying things, trial and error. So a lot of people don't take it seriously and don't feel it's the same as other areas of medicine because of that. And then people think it's, oh, it's a weakness, just try hard or get some counseling and to get some more exercise. And those things help. All those things help. But from people who have chemical imbalances in their system for no and reasons they have no control over, which is
Yeah.
mostly genetics. Most people who struggle with addiction, you got to look at their parents and look at, and there's
Yeah.
family history there. But yeah, but family history is number one reason. That's probably why what happened in your family, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's just talk about this one thing because this has been mind-boggling for me in my own field. And so I went and studied it, researched it, won awards for the research because there were things that were not being studied that didn't make sense to me.
Hmm.
And I come from it just doesn't make sense. I want to ask you, why are we now discovering that these treatments, like my mom who committed suicide, right?
Hmm.
These treatments fall short for patients, right? What the heck are we missing here? And are we really missing it, or we just don't want to change what we're doing?
Well, like in the case of your mom or your parents, back then, really there weren't a lot of good options. There
No.
really weren't medications around that were very well tolerated, and it's not really since the mid to latter 1980s
Yeah.
when Prozac came out that finally we started to see some medications that were helpful that were overall pretty well tolerated. And so that's why a lot of times previous generations just they're self-medicating with alcohol mostly or tobacco and that was their treatment. And so back then we just didn't know, and but that's why the last few decades has really been
Yeah.
a breakthroughs after a breakthrough when it came to different medications that have come out and how they work and then especially combining them together, which I talk about in my books a lot about how
Yeah.
it's really important to combine things together, not just one SSRI and that's it, because then people just get the side effects, some benefit, and I'm not happy with that. With my patients, I want no side effects. I want only good results. I want them to feel back to themselves again, and that's my goal with all of my patients.
Yeah, I mean, somebody said to me the other day, and we're going to talk about the three secrets in a second, but somebody said to me the other day, they were asking me about a particular protocol, a particular drug, and they were reading the side effects. And their ending comment was, you know what? None of us pay attention to side effects. They've all been normalized. That was the answer. That was like, and I was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm not a medical doctor. You should ask though, but you should see this line here where it says, you could die and get some more information. And that brings me back to the mind body connection and why you wrote the book and the three secrets to success. Want to give us a brief summary of those? And for those of you out there, the Corona Protocol, Three Secrets to Success, you can get this book on Amazon. We'll make sure you get Dr. Corona's website. But it does boil down to something like three secrets, doesn't it?
So you want me to talk about the book from the beginning? Yeah. So it was,
Give
basically
us a little snapshot.
yeah. So basically, the first decade of my practice is when I understood this whole mind-body connection, with using medications in ways not only help mood but also help physical symptoms, and that drove me to write. And I started just thinking I was going to be one book, and it ended up being three books, 12 years of writing. And that's the Healing the Mind and Body series. And there's a lot of it, a lot in there, a lot of, talking about depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, ADD, a host of things in those three books. And then I thought, I really want to write something different. And that's when I really love fiction. I have read fiction my whole life. And so the Corona Protocol, the one with the very long subtitle that you mentioned, which has been
Yeah.
probably my most successful book so far. Yeah, that's the book that pretty much half fiction, half nonfiction, where I tell a lot of like 30 original short stories about different people and not only the stories and about, but also solutions and how to help people with those conditions. And that led, and then I thought after that book, now I've written four books, but I really need to get to teach doctors and nurse practitioners and physician assistants, and I really need to teach. So that's why I wrote my last two books, the Three Secrets and the Prescriber's Guide so I can give them very, very detailed ways of learning and knowing how to do things. And so
Yeah.
that's why there's so much detail in those two books. And, and I think doctors also, if they read my third book of my first series, there's a lot there's that's really meant also for doctors, that third book.
Yeah.
But and also not just doctors. I think with the two newest books, I think I've had some patients read them and say they get a lot out of them. I thought that would be way too technical for people, but a lot of people are really interested in that kind of detail.
Yeah, they're interested because they want to know they want to know the different questions now to ask their doctors.
Right.
And, I have a friend that is what's the right language, nurse practitioner who basically writes the prescriptions, right?
Mhm.
And we were talking about this book, and what she was telling me is there's nothing like it. There's nothing she learns in school, doesn't get a lot of information from the doctor. And what was her word? Eye opening. But, part of this is she said, most people don't know the difference between SSR. They don't know the SSRs, and she was really shocked about the off label medication part. Can you explain to people what off label means?
Well, it really means cutting edge medicine. So off-label means, let's say it's an antidepressant. Well, I use it for that, but I use it for anxiety disorders. I use it for chronic pain like fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, things that are stress related. All that's off label. All that is so when you use medication for what it was not originally intended to be used for,
Yeah.
that's considered off label. But that's if doctors don't prescribe off label, especially in this field of medicine, they're not doing it right because you have to go off label. You can't listen to the companies about anything. I mean, the commercials are ridiculous. Oh, this could cause you to die, or this could commit suicide with this. So people see commercials and they're like, I'm not going to take that. Look at all those warnings. It's like 5 minutes to go through all those warnings on those commercial. Well, the FDA and the government forces the companies to say things like that, even though it's not true. And I look at those commercials. I prescribe all the things on commercials, and I've never seen one of the things they mention. So I think that the problem is when people, or the same thing with researching online. I mean, people go on Google and I call it Doctor
Mhm.
Google, and chat it, and they try to get medical information that way. And unfortunately, like I said, people are misled, and because of this mentality out there that, oh, you got to do everything except medications, and that medications are only if it's super extreme. Well, no, if someone's not feeling themselves, I want to get them back to themselves. And no matter even if it's mild, but if it's been going on a long time, I want to get to it and resolve it for the person.
Yeah. And, let's talk about this because, part of what happens for people like you and me, we get a little hot under the collar and we come out. And I will tell you this, when COVID first came out, I had a friend who was a vet, like dogs, cats, that kind of vet, right? And nobody knew what to do with COVID. And he saw what he was doing with his pets to cure them. And he shared this on air about ivermectin. And I'm telling you, they pulled my show hotter than a hot knife that goes through butter. Now, for those of you that are monitoring this show, I want you to point to several different research articles now. American Cancer Society, National Institute of Health, because now I'm saying this based on the New England Journal of Medicine article. So I'm not just talking opinion, folks, so don't pull this show. What we're talking about is things we've researched, we understand. And so, from your perspective, coming out with this book, how has this been received?
Oh, very well. I've gotten a lot of a lot of people emailing me and sending me letters, and a lot of people, they say, "Oh, you changed my life." I never knew that.
Yeah,
I had lost all hope,
yeah,
and so and what some people can do. Well, some people who contact me end up becoming my patients because I can see people remotely,
yeah.
but some, I say, get my two final books, take them to your doctor, and just ask your doctor, can you read these and try to treat me in a better way. But If the doctor hopefully doesn't get offended by that. But yeah, I wanted to, again, I'm not sure this is answering your original
Yeah,
question.
no, it does. It does because you have to be bold enough to do that. Now, look, I went through this for myself where we totally exposed kind of stage 4 Lyme disease because that's what I had. Nobody figured it out except my naturopath.
Oh,
And
wow.
then, of course, my naturopath and my rheumatologist got together, and my rheumatologist wrote about 60 different scathing letters until he stopped. And so this is where we are. We're in a world where we have to keep fighting. I read an article the other day that came out about Lyme disease. Of course, COVID took, but I was shocked. We are still citing data, the same number, 476,000 cases that is 30 years old. But we have to speak out. We have to write books like you've written because
Mhm.
isn't the underlying reason for this is to save lives?
I'm sorry, ask that again.
Save lives.
What,
This is to
what?
save lives,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, the COVID, that was just a disaster of a couple of years. It just was, talk about mental health worsening. That it was a
Oh,
really bad time for mental health. People just, you know, not be able to go out and do things and stuck inside a lot. And like I said, the whole thing was completely mismanaged also. So thankfully we got through it and are on the other side now, but it was a bad time for people.
yeah. And we learned a lot of lessons. We also learned, how technology could step up. One of the vehicles we're using, thank you, Zoom, right? One of the vehicles we're using. And we don't ever want to go through that again because I think it's to your point. I don't think so you know what this reminds me of, Dr. Paul? Okay. We went through 2008-9. Remember that? Where the
Mhm.
crisis of ceiling fell in. Do you know my own profession didn't come out and really speak about the mental trauma of that, of millions of people, middle class people losing their jobs. And we never went back to talk about it. And
Mhm.
what I find now is we really need to talk about it while we're not experiencing COVID, the ongoing ripple effect of that. Isn't that what your book is about? Ripple effects don't go away.
No, they don't go away, and they continue on and on until they're finally resolved and finally treated. And and again, I think I believe naturopaths do a great job with what they do. But as far as psychotropic medication, what I work with, it's amazing how they change
Yep.
people's lives. It's
Yeah.
incredible, and people have said that. Oh, I want to do anything except for that. Well, if you tried other things, and, if you go to a naturopath and get to take some supplements and they work, that's one thing. But if not, the
Yeah.
solutions really are very easy to it's
Yeah.
really what medications do. They rebalance a person's nervous system. They
Yeah.
chemicals are going the wrong way, and the medications force them to go the right way. And so that what I'm looking for is achieving a normality when people come to me back at the
Yeah.
towards the end and say, I feel like me again. I haven't felt like this for so many years.
Yeah. Let's talk about this. I happen to have a naturopath that was also a certified oncologist, very unique individual. And by the way, those things we're about to talk about, let's talk about the psychotropic factor, because when did I first hear that? Oh, growing up in New York, was it Andy Warhol? You understand where I'm going. We have had information and knowledge that where did it go for 50 years, right? What happened? What's going on? But can you share how you're bringing it back in the treatment? Because here's my own healing journey. It wasn't one doctor, it wasn't one naturopath, it was a combination of things, including some of the things you and I are talking about right now.
Mhm.
We are not a one size fits all.
Absolutely not. And so that's why, I had patients who benefited from chiropractors, from naturopaths, and I love working with other providers because there's not just sometimes only just one solution. Like you said, you've had like a Lyme disease diagnosed, and probably a standard doctor probably would miss that. So thankfully, there's providers out there that
Yeah.
that can help you, especially if we work together. And so so I think I'm hoping I provided the solution and with my
Yeah.
books because I don't think there's no other books out there like this like these.
No.
Yeah, and so none of the there's a lot of books out there, but and I've seen a lot of them. And I'm just not impressed because they don't they're not helping because they're just they're the same old, and so
Exactly.
I think in primary care doctors don't feel comfortable treating these things, so they punt to psychiatry, and psychiatrists are not always easiest people to work with for patients. They're expensive, and so sometimes it's not practical. So people are kind of left being kicked around and trying to find the answers when the answers are there. It's just that the providers need to discover those answers to help their patients.
Yeah, and see, this is why I love your book and I love the work you're doing because you're breaking the mold. And you're right. I mean, can you imagine being I actually know a couple of psychiatrists in the field, and there is a formula you must follow. Right?
Mhm.
Right? There you go. The world of psychology, even, there's a reason I didn't go down the path of clinical psychology. I couldn't do it. I just knew too much. I couldn't do it. I couldn't diagnose somebody and put them in a box that wasn't going to get them healthy.
Mhm.
I want to ask you this. There are a lot of symptoms. People are not sleeping at night. I mean, come on now. And if I were to ask you one thing to share on how the solutions you provide are different than what is out there 99% of the time, which one would you pick?
One word is difficult. The mind body connection, understanding that the physical attack and the
Yeah.
emotional run together. One word, ooh, that would be tough. It's,
All right, I'll let you. Okay, I'll cut your break. How about a short paragraph?
well, I mean, again, the physical. So basically, the nervous system of the body works on the physical and the emotional parts of the body. So, when there's emotion like stress, anxiety, it affects the body physically. So that's a lot of people can relate to like, oh, my neck, my shoulder, my upper back. When you're under stress, people complain of symptoms and so basically it's all related to the nervous system, and so if you balance the nervous system properly,
Yeah.
mood gets better, body feels better. So that's why I mean so the connection that connection is really vital, and that's like I said, that started me with on my writing journey. I talk about it a lot, even in my
Mm,
most recent books, because it's important. It's a very important topic.
yeah.
The vast majority of doctors miss it. They don't understand the connection.
Nope.
They don't change how they do things. And again, psychiatrists, one way I look at it, primary care doctors, they look at the body but not the brain. And psychiatrists look at the brain but they forget about the body. So
Yes.
I kind of put two and two together and connect those two and to connect the two specialties and to get the results I've gotten, to get all these
Yeah.
all these revelations that have come
Yeah.
to me. So
You know what the irony of all this is for me? Because I wouldn't be talking to you if I didn't do what you just did in the book. But we have not applied it to mental health. This is where the breakthrough is for me. What you're doing, that's the breakthrough. But you can go back thousands of years here, Dr. Paul. Thousands of years. They knew that connection. And it wasn't until, shall I say, in the context of recently, let's just call it recently, because 1950 to me is recent,
right.
right? In the history of this. But it wasn't until something shifted, something changed, that we thought, maybe what was used for thousands of years just won't work now. But what you're bringing back is the fact that it does work,
Mhm.
and we can integrate it with modern science, modern modern solutions. That's what I think your book is about.
And again, people remember that these are extremely safe, very effective. And I call this the holistic solution because
Yes.
it helps the body heal itself.
Yep.
And so I think the people who are anti-medication out there, really anti-science because medications really they don't make people they're not happy pills where you take a pill and everything's always wonderful all the time. They the best way to explaining it, and I talk about it in the secrets, is we get people to remission, meaning getting people completely back to themselves. Some people say I'm back to my old self again, and some people say, you know what, I've never felt this good in my life. Actually,
There you go.
I never knew that someone could feel is this way. You mean some people feel this way without taking anything? I go, yeah, some people do. A lot of people do. I said, but a lot of people, really need this kind of help and aren't getting it.
That's right.
And it blew her away that because now she's telling her friends, she referred people to me because now she's,
Yeah.
her tennis friends, and now she's realizing how common this is, because not only it's genetics, but hormonal changes make a difference, which is why it gets worse in menopause, it gets worse after pregnancy, it gets worse at puberty, and then trauma is in there in the mix. So there's so many factors that lead to these imbalances happening. And again, I have one solution, rebalancing the chemicals, but it doesn't mean it's the only solution because I work with other people. I talk to my patients about exercise and eating right and
Yeah.
seeing a therapist when you need to, and trying to get helping people try to get sober. But that's why I really enjoy what I'm doing because it's
Yeah.
it's really helping to change people's lives, which is why doctors go into medicine is we want to help people. As corny as that sounds, it's the truth. We want help our patients, and I can think of nothing else in the field of medicine that's even close to this as far as as far as the need and as far as not only the need for patients but the need for doctors to learn this, and there's nothing else out there that's, like I said, everything else is it's pretty much the same old, sometimes new discoveries, but this is basically there's been discoveries for over 30 years. It's just unfortunately most providers just
Yeah.
never discover those things.
Yeah. That's why I love what you're doing. Now, I want to thank you for joining me. How do we get the book? How do people find out more about you? And most importantly, how do they contact you directly?
So I'm on Instagram and TikTok. I do a couple 90-second videos a week on those two platforms. They're all on my website, www.doctor, so DR for doctor, so drpaulcoronamd.com. I have all six books there on ebooks. They're on hard and soft cover. The Corona Protocol with the long subtitle, that one's on Audible audiobook. My and the books are on Amazon, Barnes Noble, and Walmart. My TV show, the Dr. Paul Show, which has done really well. I've had a couple over 200,000 views last year, about 6,000 views a week. So that's on YouTube. It's on Roku.
Great.
It's on Amazon Fire. So that's I'm really enjoying. Most of the show is me sitting with patients and going over their stories and with me,
Yeah.
and then how they progressed and how they got better, and so that's a lot of the show. And so
Yeah. I want to thank you for everything you're doing. We still have more battles to fight. There's no question about it.
yep,
But doing what you're doing, put it in writing, get it in out on the media, that's what's the most important thing because it gives people the option to ask a different question.
right.
That's what I love.
And if they want
What's your
to,
website, Dr. Paul?
my website, yeah, drpaulcoronamd.com. If you want to contact me, directly, if you want to become a patient, just you can email me, which is drcorona at the website address. Or
Good.
my phone number is 949-481-0118. And my assistant, Leslie, can help with you.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. And we'll make sure
Thank
we get
you.
this out there. And again, Emily will take this also. Emily, we should drop Dr. Paul's television show in the script of this as well. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
everything you're doing.
Appreciate it.
For those of you out there, just tip of the iceberg here. This is a half-hour show, tip of the iceberg. You want the whole iceberg? Get a hold of Dr. Paul. All right, we'll see you next time.